The news that's come out of New York State just within the last hour about the novelist, the author Salman Rushdie, who has been stabbed at an event in New York State. Details still coming in, but police say that he has been flown to hospital and that someone is in custody. You'll remember, I'm sure, that Salman Rushdie was the subject of an Islamic fatwa a long time ago now, after the Satanic Verses was published in the late 1990s. Let's go straight to our North America correspondent, John Sudworth, who is following this. First of all, just tell us how much we know. What is known, John?
Details are now starting to come in. The first we heard of this incident was social media pictures, some upsetting pictures showing Salman Rushdie lying on stage at this event where he was due to speak at the Chautauqua Institute. It's an arts and education center in New York State. We could see him surrounded by people providing medical assistance, but we do now have it confirmed in a police statement that there was an attack on Mr Rushdie. The police statement says that he has suffered an apparent injury to his neck and that he was taken by helicopter to hospital and his condition is unknown. As you say, Jane, Mr Rushdie has lived under this threat of assassination for more than 30 years after that fatwa was issued back in 1989 by the then supreme leader of Iran, who had deemed his book, The Satanic Verses, to be blasphemous. There have been a number of other attempts on his life over the years. He's an Indian-born British citizen, but now lives in New York, so he won't have been far from home attending this event in upstate New York. And as you'd imagine, already an outpouring of shock and upset on social media, in particular, of course, from the literary world, but politics and social media users in general reacting with horror to this news.
Absolutely. And just a word about the fatwa, because, I mean, younger viewers won't even remember it. It was that long ago, but it was an extraordinarily difficult period. And Salman Rushdie lived in hiding for many years with immense security, didn't he, for a long time after that?
He did. The threat to his life was, of course, taken very seriously. Over the years, there were attempts to try to get the fatwa rescinded. Iran as a state seemed to distance itself from that proclamation in the late 90s amid a sort of lowering of tensions between the UK and Iran at the time. But the threat was never really withdrawn. The bounty has remained in place. We don't know whether, how much what has happened today is connected to any of that history. But there will be a strong suspicion, of course. The police statement also saying that the suspect was taken into custody. And again, social media showing pictures of a man being taken away by the police outside that education centre where Mr Rushdie was due to speak.
All right, John, thank you for now. More from you later, I'm sure. John Sudworth there following that for us in Washington, D.C. Let's stay with this story because Mark Summer joins me, who is a journalist from Buffalo News. Mark, thanks for joining us, because I know you've been speaking to people who were actually at the event. Explain for our audience here in the UK who you've been talking to.
Sure. I've talked to a few people who were at the event. It took place in Western New York, far away from New York City. I know a lot of people tend to think of everything in New York happening in the city, but we're about 7 hours away from New York City in the western corner of the state. The Chautauqua Institution is an educational and cultural venue that people go to in the summertime. Salman Rushdie was one of the guest speakers this week. He was due to speak at 10:45 this morning. He was going to be in conversation with another person on the subject of the need for asylum for writers. Minutes after the 10:45 start, just as introductions were beginning, I'm told from witnesses that a man with a black mask came out of the audience, jumped on stage, and began attacking Mr. Rushdie. The people I talked to weren't able to tell exactly what had happened. We've since learned, at least I've heard it reported, that Mr. Rushdie was stabbed in the neck. Shortly after the man jumped on stage, I'm told 10 to 15 people who were there to see the program jumped on stage in an attempt to subdue the attacker and to come to Mr. Rushdie's aid. They succeeded in subduing him. Mr. Rushdie, I'm told, was on the ground for possibly 5 minutes or so, and he was helped up and with a man on each side taken off the stage.
And so from the people you're speaking to who were there at that cultural centre, they were there to hear the lecture from a renowned, well-known novelist. Are they saying to you that the only people on the stage were Salman Rushdie himself and whoever was going to conduct the interview with him? Did they give you any sense of any other security, or was it just a regular literary lecture?
Well, that's the security issue is a big one, and I'm sure we'll learn about that in the coming hours. But at the moment, we know that he has often traveled with a lot of security, going, of course, back to the fatwa issued against him by the Ayatollah Khomeini back in 1989, and over charges of blasphemy. We know that he was in hiding for years and always had a lot of security. It's hard to believe there wouldn't have been significant security, but we don't have the answer to that. But he was on the stage with a man named Henry Rees, who is going to be in conversation with Mr. Rushdie, and then the person who introduced the program. Apparently, it was literally within seconds of the start of the program that this attacker rushed the stage.
And from what you're saying, this is this is not a venue that is known to UK viewers probably, but this is in the area. Would you describe it as a well-known arts venue? And this is typically the sort of programming that they would do, and these sort of events would be perfectly well advertised like any other talk or arts event.
Absolutely. It tends to draw from people who go there. People will stay part of the summer at the institution. It's a very large campus, but people can come from outside as well. So it would be well advertised, certainly.
Yeah. All right. Mark, thank you so much. Mark Summer there, who's a reporter at Buffalo News. So just to bring you right up to date with everything that we've been able to establish thus far, you will have got the sense, of course, there from from Mark Summer there, who's a reporter with Buffalo News, that this was a regular literary event, quite a well-known venue in that part of New York State. Just to say, it's not New York City itself; it's some hours away in New York State. I'm joined by Carl Levin. Carl, thank you for joining us here on the BBC. Now, just to be clear, were you actually in the hall at the event itself? Explain that for us if you can.
Yes, I was. I was about 14 or 15 rows back, perhaps. The venue is popularly known here as the AMP, short for amphitheater, and it's a fairly large covered outdoor amphitheater that can seat a few thousand people. I arrived a couple minutes early today for the talk because we all knew that Salman Rushdie was going to be extremely popular, and he always has something important to say. And so we're all still reeling here to try to understand what this means for those with the courage to pursue their creative passions, and what it means for America, and what it means for this particular community that has never seen anything like this.